is, and then are you engaging them? Engagement looks different depending on where you are, but those are the two big ones for me. Communicate who we are, what we're about, what the culture is, and then make sure people are engaged in that, right? Like make sure you have brought people in. I think those are the two big ones for me.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I'll just say ditto. No, I think it all comes down to communication. Look, communication from the top. It's one of the things that we've seen as we grew from 5 to 15 to now most to 50. The channels of communication change very much so, and the frequency that you need to communicate and the repetitiveness that seems a bit repetitive, that takes a little bit getting used to, both at the leadership team and everywhere on down. Everybody's like, oh, you already told me that, but not everybody resonates. It does not resonate every time with everybody. So you wind up sounding like a broken record, so that you can make sure that everybody is ultimately on the same page, in the boat, rowing the same direction.
Great. And Siobhan?
Yeah, I'll just kind of broaden that thought of Jonathan's. What we see here and why people tell us they stay with us is because they really believe that they're connected to the business purpose. They believe that they're adding value to our growth and they're part of it. And the truth is they are. And yes, the communication is what drives that connection. So they feel like, you know, if we really are contributing to the growth strategy. So it's communicating the strategy and then how they're impacting it. But I think across, it doesn't matter what company you're in, what we hear from people when we're out recruiting is, you know, they really want to understand the purpose of the mission of the company and identify with that. And once we can make that connection, then all those other things are exponentially more important.
Fantastic. So thematically, I hear a couple of things. Caring about the employee experience and really prioritizing that and understanding what the individuals need to thrive, and asking what someone needs to be excited about their work, and giving people that opportunity to stay challenged, grow, and be excited. And then also, I hear this other category of communicating with people, even abundantly, repetitively communicating with people, but so people feel eye to eye about where the business is going, and that people at whatever level they're in the organization can handle these conversations, and giving them that information and letting them know not just what's happening, but that they are an important part of it, and how, showing that you value them and value what they're doing. So before we keep going, would love for participants that are listening right now to plug into the chat function why you came onto a conversation about retention. Why is this issue important to your specific business or to you personally? So if you want to add that into the chat function, we look forward to seeing what you put in there. And while those answers are coming in, I have a next question for all of you panelists, which is, let's look at this from a different angle for a minute. Sometimes we put a lot of effort into what has people stay, and we're doing retention programs and efforts to make sure people are growing and doing all the good work to see that people are staying, communicating, but we're not tending to fixing the things that have people leave. So for any of you panelists who have worked in an environment that has had high attrition, firstly, let me ask, which of you, if any, have worked in an environment over your career that has had high attrition? Yes, I see at least a nod or two. Yep, a few nods. Great. So from those of you who have, what were the causes of high attrition? And Siobhan, how about we start with you?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's too bad we can't name those people and companies, but that wouldn't be very nice. I think what I have seen is people, we all know that people leave people, they don't leave companies. So it's really leadership behaviors that create the most turnover, I would say. People want to believe it's financial, but that's just not the case. And we have seen that in 2 years running in our scores of our employee opinion survey. We score extremely low, unfortunately, in our wages, satisfied with your wages, at 61% satisfaction and 94% satisfaction in trust and pride in the company. And that's an amazing disparate score, but it's an indicator that they're not here for the money. Yes, they want us to fix it. And yes, we absolutely have to. And we're super excited to do that. We have plans and we get tangible feedback when we give them the results, but it does tell an interesting story.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. Firstly, thank you for sharing real life scenarios of what's going on inside your business. Always love that frankness. I'm sure it's appreciated not just by us as panelists, but by the participants. And you really can see that stark difference of even when somebody says, yes, there needs to be some, do better at this, but there's so much that's going well that you still have my loyalty. Deborah, how about for you, from your own experience, what has, in high attrition companies, what are the things that have had people leave?
So a couple of things. I do completely agree with Siobhan on the fact that people leave people in most circumstances. And so the investment in manager training and ensuring that you have leadership alignment and good leaders is really critical. In some environments, I've seen rapid change have an impact on the day-to-day experience and the culture. So in high growth environments, it's easy for you to go from a very tight-knit culture with a few core individuals who've known each other for a really long time to the company doubling, tripling, quadrupling in size, and the culture and dynamic shifts, as well as the kind of work that gets done begins to shift. And so I have found that there are periods during high growth at companies where individuals are more attuned to a particular stage and want to do work in a certain way. And once you get to kind of that next phase, you run into challenges. I will also say, feeling supported and empowered to make the decisions that have an impact on your day-to-day work and on the experience that you're delivering either to your internal or external customers. People want to feel proud of the work that they're doing. And when you limit people's ability to have an impact on the quality of their work or to be able to make the decisions that have a tangible impact on what they're delivering, it chips away at that relationship with their company or their employer.
Fabulous. And Nanika, Nanika or Jonathan, actually, I'm calling on you, Nanika, because I saw your hand go up that you've worked in a place that had high attrition. But Jonathan, please do chime in if you have something to say. But Nanika, why don't you go first? And what have you seen has caused high attrition?
So a couple of things. Both Siobhan and Deborah touched on this, and I'm going to look at a couple notes I took while they were speaking. But they talked about leadership. They talked about a couple things with leaders when those types of things change. And I would add to that, right, that people have a tendency to digest the bad news. So there's high growth. With that high growth comes change. Sometimes there's changes in leadership, and sometimes departments are shifted because what we're doing, the direction we're going, looks different than the direction we were going before. So in my experience, there's an issue when you don't set expectations, right? Like we've lived this way for so long, but now something or someone is coming in and that's changing and people don't like it. And a big part of that is because we never set people down and said, okay, listen, it's time to reset. Things are going to change a little bit. I used to work for one organization, and the way that we grew was through acquisition. But through those acquisitions, it changed the way we did business. People didn't like it. They weren't happy. A lot of positions didn't change, but people, that's how they felt. They felt like, oh, this is going to change. This isn't the company that I once knew and loved. I remember when we used to do X, and we never set expectations to say, or reset expectations to say, well, we're not going to do X anymore, but we're going to do Y. And so people weren't happy. So not setting expectations, I've seen that be an issue. And then doing what you've always done. So, okay, so now we've got these new things happening, new people coming in. We're going to reset expectations. And there's a reason that we can't do things the way we've always done. I think Siobhan said, too bad we can't drop company names and people. So I'm not going to do that. But I literally used to work for an organization where it was nothing for somebody to say, well, that's the way we've always done it. Okay, well, that doesn't work for this particular age group, or that doesn't work for this particular workforce, because as the workforce is shifting, you have to be flexible and shift with it. And when you are not, again, people leave. Like you can't be the same manager that you were 15 years ago. I respect your experience. I respect what you've done. I respect the knowledge you bring to the table, but you can't treat this particular group of people like you treated the ones from 15 years ago. So doing what you've always done, not being flexible, those are the things that I've seen happen in the various organizations that I've worked with. And so you have to reset, whatever word you want to use, some expectations and get people at least thinking about it, right? Like if you're not happy, you still don't want to stay, I get that, but at least I have done my part and I have communicated to you, again, because my thing is communication and engagement, right? I've communicated to you what needs to happen, and I've tried to pull you in by being as honest as I can with you in that moment, in that time. And so that would be my feedback on that.
Yeah, so thematically, I hear from through this whole conversation, actually, this thread being woven of honesty, frank conversations. People would rather the truth than the lack of information, even if it's hard to hear, even if they're not going to like it. Giving people the whole story and letting them deal with digesting, that's where we're at, and that trusting that people can handle that and what that provides, and that transparency is actually, when you don't have it, it's disruptive and creates dissonance. And when you do have it, people are like, okay, I can trust you. It creates some loyalty. The other big thing I hear is about leadership behavior, going back to something you said in the beginning, Siobhan, about environments with attrition issues. I too have seen where people are working with putting time, attention, organizational priority, and budget against retention efforts. Meanwhile, there's disrespectful leadership behavior going on. It's like, okay, well, you got a hole in the bathtub here, and if you don't tend to the problems, all the effort can get undermined. So really looking for shoring up the issues before adding in all the good stuff. Panelists, I just want to say, if you haven't already looked, make sure to look in the chat function at what people are writing in, and feel free to jump in and respond if you want, if there's something in particular. I'm seeing so many good things come in from, looks like, hundreds of participants in here. So you guys feel free to read that, but I'm going to go ahead and ask a next question, which is coming from Ryan. And Ryan is asking, let's talk about the role of managers and what do managers need to do to create a high retention environment. And Jonathan, do you want to take the first crack at this one?
Giving people big sandboxes is what we like to say. So hopefully you're hiring people well, and unfortunately firing people well, or fortunately firing people well too when you need to. And in between those two, giving them a lot of room to roam. The manager will never, on a day-to-day basis, is not the person you want doing the job. So the manager's job is to, I like to say, remove roadblocks and make sure that the people on their team and they're part of the organization have all the tools at their disposal, and then let the people that you've hired, who hopefully are aligned with your culture and your values and your vision and everything that comes from hiring well, let them roam, right? And that gets the whole sandbox analogy. Give them a really big sandbox. I don't like the leash analogy, but give them a lot of leash to play on, and they'll do great work if you're hiring the right people and putting the right kind of framework and groundwork in place for everybody.
Great. So big sandbox. And are you saying give the managers a big sandbox, or make sure the managers also are making sure that they're giving each of their people a big sandbox?
Everybody gets a big sandbox here at Square Foot. Managers get a big sandbox.
Everybody needs that big sandbox. All right. Not too crowded in the sandbox. All right, great. And Nanika, you want to jump in next on that question about the role of managers?
Sure. You see, I'm struggling with the mute button.
I was smiling because Alejandra, one of our participants in the webinar, said, I want a big sandbox, please.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. So I've seen a lot of comments about people trying to retain managers. So I'm looking at a couple things. I saw somebody specifically said they need tools for their leaders. One of the things that I learned with this is that you have to understand, regardless of the capacity you're in, like what's your target, what's your company's mission, vision, or values, whatever it is, because that's really the thing that you should be living. And so from day to day, if your coaching manager's on that, they're familiar with it. Everybody knows the mantra, whatever the case may be. That's really a good guiding post. I've gone into an organization before and I was the only person trying to work through the culture. And I learned the hard way that, first off, it was a whole lot of energy that wasn't going to work because I didn't have a support team. So you need to make sure that everybody is on the same page as far as what your leaders, what your managers should be doing, because they really do set the tone, right? So if they're not bought into what the company believes in, what the culture is, mission, vision, values, again, you may not have all three, but whatever it is that you have, everybody needs to be bought into that and understand that. I think the managers, the leaders, I prefer to call them, those are the folks, again, I can't say it enough, that really do set the tone for what you are doing. I can't remember who said it, and I think everybody agreed that people don't necessarily, they don't leave the company, right? The company hasn't wronged me. However, my manager, my leadership didn't make me feel safe. My manager, my leadership didn't make me feel appreciated. And people go home saying, you know what, I don't even think they heard me. Because I'm just talking, nobody's taking action. So you have to make sure that folks are heard. You have to make sure that your supervisors have an understanding of mission, vision, values. You also need to make sure they have an understanding of who they're working with, right? You can't treat everybody the same, because if you do, you're treating somebody wrong. Like that's like a quote I picked up from somewhere whenever ago, right? Like if you're treating everybody the same, you're treating somebody wrong, because everybody doesn't think the same. So you have to get out of groupthink, and you have to learn to be flexible with your workforce so that people get, or they feel like, okay, this person gets me, they respect me, they hear me. They may not be able to do everything I need, but I do at least feel like they're taking it back. And that's just the ever occurring theme: communication, two-way, listen, talk, get the feedback. And to me, that's what their roles are, right? You are driving the voice that's not necessarily heard as loud as yours, because a person may not be in leadership.
Awesome, Monica. All right, Siobhan.
Yeah, I, as it relates to managers, you know, I think it's so important that we allow our manager, well, first of all, we have to hire the right leaders to lead our people. So I would say, before you can say, what do you want the managers to do? Let's make sure we're hiring right. And because the ripple effect is tremendous. And the hire piece, you've got to visualize them interacting with those teams. And how do you see that dynamic? And how do you see, when you're meeting them to interview, you know, how do you see them leading in your organization? Maybe on paper their competencies are spot on, but you know, are they really values aligned with your organizations? Like Nanika said when she talked a lot about values, I'm a huge fan of values aligned decisions in any event. And then allow them to be empathetic, and require that they're leading the teams through an empathetic lens, and that they actually are allowing their teams an understanding how to integrate their life, right? There's no such thing as work-life balance, but if we're working in an environment where we understand that we have to integrate it, then we feel supported. So I guess that would be what I would we do require from our managers.
And I'd just add, completely agree with the concept of and the practice of empathy. Employees don't expect their manager to solve every problem for them or for the workplace to be perfect. They want to be heard. They want to be part of decision making that impacts them, and they want to be valued and nurtured along in their day-to-day and in their career. And the impact that empathy has there is not just listening. It's not a one-way communication. It's that you get into their shoes and understand what it's like to walk a mile in their shoes, whether it's a work problem or a home problem that's impacting work, and really help them move along in that process. It's not that they expect everything to be solved. It's that they want to be heard and valued as an individual. I saw a comment with regard to, and I think it came from Alejandra, regarding the baby boomers and the millennials in the workplace. And I find it really interesting because we still call out those generational differences. I was really concerned coming into Namely 3 years ago because I had never managed a full-on 100% millennial workforce, and I'd heard all the generalizations. And the reality is, your boomers are people, your Gen Xers are people, your millennials are people. If we stop trying to delineate based on generalizations and how we expect them to behave and what we expect is important to them, and we actually get to know them as individuals and really on a deep level get to know them, we can empower a much better situation in their day-to-day working life and in the workplace in general.
Yes, so people operations and executives have the job of bolstering the managers and investing in the managers and prioritizing for all the managers that it's critical, mission critical for the business to look for what each person on their team is motivated and demotivated by, cares about, and then personalizing the experience for that and equipping the managers with the tools to have these conversations and to have empathy and to get it, and then with the ability to come up with creative solutions to keep people excited and engaged. We have a question here from that just came in that says, from Cassandra, that says, how does HR help managers get on the same page and aligned with values? So anybody want to jump in to that question?
I'll jump in, Meredith. Well, it's not easy, right? You know, I think you have to have constant communication and transparency and expect then that your managers are going to trickle that message down. And it sounds, oh yeah, Siobhan, sounds good. How do you do it? You know, you have to put in a marketing strategy internally to communicate and down the same way you do for your clients. So whatever that communication cadence is, you have to employ that internally in your organization as well, and to really get that behavior shift is one example that I can speak to.
Anybody else want to jump in on that? Well, while you're thinking, I'm going to share another question that is related to managers and how we support the managers. This is a question from Allison. And she says, there seems to be a conflict in data that employees leave managers. There's strong data that supports that, but also other data that says the highest percentage leave because of lack of career advancement or promotional opportunities, and only 17% leave specifically because of managers. So what I hear you guys as panelists saying about that distinction is the two issues are actually the same, that the career advancement and promotional opportunities is the managers, because whose role it is to make sure that that person, that each employee has a clear path in front of them, an aligned vision about how they can grow, and getting the coaching in order to grow, and the promotional opportunities and the stretch assignments to grow into all falls to the managers, that it's the executives and the people operations function that create the frameworks to support the managers to do that, but really the managers one-on-one getting in the trenches and doing that. But does anybody on this, any of our panelists want to jump in and say something else about those two divergent ways of looking at the staff?
Go ahead, Siobhan.
I want to go back. I'm sorry. I want to go back to the like getting your leadership involved in your values. And I do think it's difficult, but I also think, and I'm going to use the realistic example of a company that I worked for that I did not know they didn't have mission, vision, values until I got there, right? Shame on me for not doing research. You live and you learn. But it has to be in place from the start, right? Like you may stray away from it. It may get a little bit murky, but if it doesn't exist, it's difficult for you to come in and try to do that. If it is there, you've got your mission, your vision, your values, whatever it is, then you need to be leading by example. You need to be the person who, like, people see you, they believe in it because they see you doing it. People are always watching. And if you have it, you're not living it, it's hanging up, you know, behind you in your space, whatever that may look like, but you're not living it, then it's hard to convince somebody else that they should. And so I think that from an objectivity perspective, that's what human resources is to me, right? You're the person who's there, you're objective, you're going to look at everything and you're going to be partial, but you have to be living the values so that people will take you seriously. And I think that's how you get people to jump on board and want to do what you're doing because you're living it, right? If you don't have anything to live though, right? If you don't have anything to live up to because it doesn't exist, that can be very hard, if not impossible. And I just kind of wanted to put that comment out there that I feel like you have a lot more influence in the human resource profession than one, sometimes we're given credit for, and two, than sometimes we live, right? So we have to make the difference because we have to be the people that go out there and push it. But you have to be living it too, right? You have to be consistent. So I wanted to comment on that.
Thank you, Nanika. And Deborah, I think you were going to say something before. Should we come back to you?
Yes, I lost track of the question though, the last question. Do you have that handy?
Yes, it was about the different ways of looking at the stats. Is it the managers or is it career advancement that has people leave?
Yeah.
Or
so,
are those things the same thing?
Yeah. I mean, I would look at it personally, I look at it as a leader, what I have control over, which expands far beyond the day-to-day in my interactions with colleagues. And so from a leadership perspective, I look at what do I have control over in the immediate and what do I need to advocate for and work with the HR team in the longer term. So from a career advancement and growth perspective, you have a lot of autonomy when you're managing a team to create opportunities to grow people's skills, to have them develop along a spectrum, whether they want to stay on your team or they want to move to another team, whether they want to stay in the same role and just increase their earnings capacity, or they want to move to another position. If you as a manager step back, look at where they're at and where they want to go, there are a lot of creative ways to get them developed and to give them more experience over the course of time as the business catches up or as their skill set catches up to that next role through stretch assignments, job rotation. Formal training is always great, but the reality is it's the informal work that you do on the day-to-day basis and the peer teaching and learning and rotational opportunities that really enrich someone's experience and expands their skill set. And a lot of times it comes across as I didn't have an opportunity to advance, when the reality is I didn't have the opportunity to do interesting work and learn new skills. So I think as leaders, we have to step back and really consider how much we have control over and how we can get creative to help people meet their individual needs and also have a positive impact on the business.
Go ahead. Yeah, Nanika.
Okay, just a super quick comment and then I'll stop talking for a few minutes. So just a perfect example of what Deborah was just talking about. So we actually had that situation in the last 30 days where we have an employee who performing well, great appraisals, the whole nine, right? But in his current capacity, there is not a lot of upward mobility, if you will. So his manager came to us and said, hey, I've got a great employee, don't want to lose them. Here are the 7 things literally that I've done to help foster some growth. I need your help. I need some ideas. And I was like, I don't know what to do. You've done 7 things. But one of the things that we came up with was he's going to be helping out with our onboarding process. And super excited the employee was because it was something simple, but what it does is it gives him the opportunity to meet every new hire coming in the door, regardless of their location, because some of our new hire or onboarding is virtual. So he's got that opportunity. He's got the opportunity to, spruce up public speaking skills, has an influence on new hires because you remember the people that brought you in, right? And this particular employee has a great story to tell. Like, I've been here for a couple of years. I've had the opportunity to do all these things. What a great place to work. And now look, I'm sitting in front of you and telling you as a new hire, what a great place this is. So just again, to just kind of provide that example of what Deborah was talking about. You don't always get to move up, but you can most certainly move out and you can make your skill set wide. Your skill set doesn't always have to be tall, and every company can't offer you a tall trajectory, but boy, we can sure make people fat with knowledge. And that's what we're doing with this employee. And it felt really good to be able to offer him that, have him accept it. And as we're growing, we're always adding new hires. So guess what? He's going to always be in front of people. And so I just thought that was just something awesome that we were able to do for an employee when, you can't move, everybody can't relocate. So he's got to stay where he is, but it doesn't change the fact that he wants to grow, and we're trying very hard
Yes.
to provide those opportunities. So just wanted to add to what Deborah was saying. So
So great. So a lot of emphasis from all of you on the importance for people to have the opportunity to stretch, grow, be challenged, be excited by their work. And some of that can be informal ways like training, and some of that can be in informal ways like job rotation, stretch assignments, and creative ways like those that Nanika came up with. So now we're going to take another look at this, which we have a question from Jen. What's the biggest misunderstanding about retention that you see in companies with attrition issues? What are they focused on that they shouldn't be? But they're thinking we're really doubling down in the right place instead of focusing, and you've seen it not turn out. So any one of you panelists, who wants to jump on that one?
I'll jump in, Mayor. First of all, as I said before, I think when we think about money, that money is the main issue. So I think we need to redirect that thought. Not that it isn't important, but I definitely think we need to redirect that thought. And I do agree that growth and development opportunities, we think they cost money. And so we tend as employers to shy away from looking at creative benefits like tuition reimbursement or developmental spend. But I guess I would say if you take the time to look at that cost versus your turnover cost, I'm sure it's less and it adds more value to your organization as you go through it. So I would say, A, it's not about the wages always, and B, what you think costs really adds value to your organization.
And saves you money.
And saves you money.
Which in the end makes you money, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'll also
Deborah, it
add,
looks like you want to say something.
yeah, I'll also add, just in looking back on both my career as a leader of large teams and my background in in-house HR, there has consistently been a lot of looking and evaluation at the people who are leaving and those last-ditch efforts to retain them, and not enough investment in who we hire and hiring right, and then how we manage those individuals through the life cycle. So I'm a huge believer in hiring slow, cover your ears, Nanika, and firing fast if they're not the right fit, because then you spend time and energy on someone who shouldn't be there. But then also employee engagement surveys really help you quantify over time what is happening in your workforce and what the trends are, and help you drill down by department, by leader, across the board on initiatives that HR can help out with. But it also helps from an HR perspective for you to consult with your managers and leaders to improving their own skill sets and what's going on specifically in their organization. So I'm an advocate of investing more on the front end in hiring and in the programs that you have to manage your workforce over time and their engagement.
Awesome. Anything any of you want to say? Oh yeah, Nanika, go for it.
I always have something to say. So I actually agree with Deborah. I am in our current environment with our growth. I don't have the luxury, if you will, of just kind of slowing down, taking a look, keeping people engaged, right? So they don't think we forgot about them. But the one thing that I just really quick on I think, Deborah, I don't want to misquote you. You said hire slow, fire fast, right? If we know that people are not suited for our team, our environment, they're not living the values, they have to go. Like, I totally agree with that, because then what ends up happening is you hold on to an individual who is affecting the rest of your team. So never mind the company, never mind the manager, they're leaving these other people that you guys know are not working out, but you let them stay here. So guess what? I'm out. So I just kind of wanted to, I agree with you, Deborah. I don't have that luxury today. So that was my only comment.
Jonathan, anything you want to say?
I agree with all of this. The one thing I'll say, if to get off topic, but to answer one of the questions that show up in the Q&A, if we want to move on to the next thing.
No, go for it, Jonathan.
Because one of the things that we've seen work really well, one of the questions asked was around employee recognition and having people feel valued. There's kind of two questions that came in back to back. So one of our core values is going the extra mile. So this is going back most of a year now. We do a bi-weekly town hall, and I ordered like 100 of these little like toy cars, like the little micro machines that kids would play with. And we ask for nominations kind of privately in advance of the town halls. Say, has anybody seen anybody exhibiting on your team or throughout the organization exhibiting the going of the extra mile? And then we publicly praise them in front of the whole company. They come up and make sure everybody claps, which is always awkward but fun. And then we read like a 2-sentence thing, which was why they were nominated for that specific value. And then we get a card, and then people keep them on their desks. It's like a little trophy for them. And there's some people who have a whole bunch of cards, which is obviously great for us to see. We actually redid our core values, or repurposed them, repackaged them, I guess, earlier this year. And now we do it across all the different values we have, which are kind of 3 or 4, which I won't bore people with here now. But we do the same call outs across all of them. And then whenever we have people to recognize, we do that and they get a card. Everybody seems to have a lot of fun with it.
It's great. I really like some of the creative things that are coming from this panel in terms of how you can creatively think out of the box to do things that hit the mark at a deeper level rather than just right on the surface. So you're talking, Jonathan, about how to celebrate and reward and have people feel valued in a fun, creative way, unique to your values and your brand. And it ties back to me to things you guys said at the beginning of this panel, just like sharing information and including people in the strategy and giving them a sandbox big enough to make decisions. Yet another way people feel valued. It's not traditional reward and recognition, but for sure a way that leaves people feeling respected and valued. That's untraditional. Also, in terms of not the standard vocabulary, one of our webinar participants asked a question about, actually made a statement about surveys and saying, instead of waiting for engagement surveys or even 6 to 8 week onboarding surveys or exiting, instead of waiting for exit surveys or engagement surveys, surveys people early, survey people during onboarding, survey them at 6 to 8 weeks, do stay interviews. So Nanika, this is something you had talked about in our pre-interview. Anything you want to say about that?
Okay. Had to find my button. So quick kudos / shout out to Namely. So Namely is the type of organization that I've never worked for before. Fast-paced technology, startup, and it has been wonderful. So we do those things, right? Like when the first day is over, it's like, hey, what did you think about this? Be honest with us. Do we need to make any changes? And so I felt like I got surveyed like 3 times just in my first day, but like 2 questions, right? If there need to be improvements, what are they? And then to your point, I am interested in what makes people stay, right? Like, why do you stay here? Do you stay here because of your leadership? Do you stay here because we order bagels on Monday? Do you stay here because we provide great snacks? What is it? Because that's the thing that, and I think probably what I said to you, Meredith, was we need to bottle up and pass out the thing that makes people stay, and then work on getting rid of the thing that you're not hearing about, right? Like, so you're doing the quarterly barbecue because your company's been doing that for like the last 15 years. People aren't into that anymore because it doesn't involve X. And that's what happened at one of my previous companies, was we just kept hanging our hat on what we used to do. And we never asked people, well, that's not true. We asked people what they wanted, and then we didn't give it to them, right? It took us so long to filter through the survey results that by the time we got ready to action that item, it didn't matter anymore. So I think that Namely does, shameless plug, I'm sorry, a wonderful job of doing just that, like asking people what they want and then providing it in real time from the surveys, and then ask people why they stay, right? Just walk around, ask people why they stay, check in on people, check in on their well-being, and find out what's the thing that makes you happy. And let's see if it makes other people happy, because it creates like this great work environment because you ask them why they stay. You ask them the things that they care about. And then, like I said, you try to bottle it up and put it in the break room so people can have access to it.
Fantastic. All right. So the questions, the great questions keep coming in. I'm so inspired by the questions that are coming in and wish we had time to handle all of them, but we're going to have to start to wrap up. So panelists, one final question for you, a minute for each one of you. Here's the question. 1 minute of advice. If people are going to do just one thing coming out of this conversation, what is the one practical, high leverage, specific thing or action you would have them take? And Jonathan, let's start with you.
Shameless plug real quick is have an office environment that you love working in every day. So anybody who needs office space, you'd be happy to help. From a more practical perspective, well, that's also very practical. I think the biggest one that people don't, I mean, we've said it like 100 times, so it'll sound repetitive, but it's whenever anybody asks, it's really fire slow, fire fast. Oh, sorry, hire slow, fire fast. It is the crux of everything. Somebody mentioned earlier, I forget who, but if it's less so about, it's good for everybody. It's good for the person who's not performing. It's good for all the people around that person who sees. By the time you as a manager see it, it's too late. Everybody else in the organization already knows. That's from the firing side, which is the sad part, which you lead with first. But the hire slow is something that we've learned to do very well over time. It's embarrassing the types of questions that we used to ask, which is just like kind of, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite book? Like nothing at all that's instructive to how well somebody will perform within the organization. So it's really important to lay out those company and cultural values and make sure that you have perfect alignment with candidates as you're going through the interview process.
Awesome. Nanika. And thanks, Jonathan.
Jonathan just said something. I wanted to comment on it and I lost my train of thought. Anyway, good, bad, or other. Oh, what he said asking people about their favorite book or something like that. Good, bad, or other, use what you know, right? Like when you know better, you do better. If you know somebody's favorite book, figure out a way to incorporate that in the way that you reward them. If you know somebody doesn't like a thing, don't do that thing, right? Good, bad, or other, use the information you have and capitalize on it. So that's what I would say. That's like my one thing. In
use
addition
what you know.
Use what you know. In addition to communication and engagement, use what you know. So
all right.
That's
awesome.
what I say.
Deborah?
Yeah, so from my point of view, being a leader of large teams, the most important thing that you can do is to maintain those manager one-on-ones and have them be robust conversations, not just about the day-to-day business that, yes, does need to get handled, but making sure that you're digging in and understanding what's important to that individual so you continue to move along the spectrum of what's important to them and you retain them and empower them to do their best work for you over the long term.
Awesome. And Siobhan?
Yeah, well, I have sort of 1.5 things, Meredith. I would say the secret to retention is to not be afraid of approaching your people strategy, your internal people strategy, just the same way you do your client strategy. Is what you're doing for your clients applicable to how could you turn that inside and do it for your employees? And if you can do that, then you're selling constantly internally as well as externally. And the half thing, which I have as part of that strategy, is really have a tool of gratitude, some sort of ritual of gratitude. Like Jonathan mentioned, his recognition. We have a handwritten note program that we use, and we still send handwritten notes home. So, and really one piece of that strategy, and I'm sure it's the case for your customers, is gratitude. So how can you incorporate that internally?
So fantastic. You each bring such a rich perspective. Thank you so much. A few quick closing thoughts. Retention is not a soft subject, has a direct effect on the bottom line. That 1.5 to 5 times a person's annual salary when they leave. Ouch, between those costs we talked about, recruiting costs, the time it takes to recruit, the time it takes to train, work not getting done all the while, and then the learning curve for somebody getting up to speed. So the pain point is real. And so how do you build a high retention environment? One that's both at that intersection, comes from two sides, high retention and high performance. Well, I heard a bunch of really great advice today, but if I just try to bottle up a few of the key things, that people are excited by the work that they're doing and challenged, which means you have to have an ear to the ground. And I think, to borrow a statement Nanika said to me before in an earlier chat, an ear to hear and an arm to do, or something like that, that you personalize that experience so that you know and give people the opportunity to learn and develop and grow, challenge themselves, take on increasing levels of responsibility, and that as a company, you equip managers to know that that's a priority and have the tools to do that. For every person on their team, how do I maximize the experience to keep this person's cup full? How do I know what motivates and demotivates them and structure work around them? How do I get together with them and align on how they want to grow, and then coach them in those ways and give them stretch assignments that don't have to cost anything to make that happen. So know how someone wants to grow, know what they care about, and then create those opportunities for them. And then a different category I heard more at the beginning than the end of this call, but that I just want to highlight, is building a community where people feel like we're all in this together and have a huge opportunity as a team, where they feel they know about the direction of the company and the strategy, and they feel excited about it. They feel like they have a place in it, that they're contributing to the overall organization, and that they're adding value in a meaningful way where every person, including themselves, counts. And then lastly, as Siobhan said just right before I spoke, approach the employee experience with that same tenacity that we approach the client or customer experience, and that goes from the senior managers, senior leaders down through the frontline managers. Counteroffers are an expensive Band-Aid, and they don't fix a person's fundamental unhappiness. So we got to get in front of it before that. To you panelists, thank you for your amazing wisdom and experience that you shared to this community. Thank you for spending this time with us. Make that investment in your people, because if it's not while they're here, it's in the recruiting costs, where it costs more and you got to do it all over again. And go make your version of this real in the world. And thank you.